I'm Rachel Thompson, 34, and my life changed forever on a Tuesday evening in April. After a brutal day wrangling third graders, I stopped at a gas station and bought a lottery ticket on impulse. That night in my cramped apartment, I mindlessly checked the numbers during a commercial break. The first number matched, then the second. By the sixth number, I couldn't breathe. $120 million. Mine. All mine. I collapsed to the floor, hyperventilating, the winning ticket clutched in my trembling hand. Before I dive into what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And if you want to hear more stories about life-changing moments and their aftermath, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to hear how my own family became my worst nightmare after my windfall. I grew up in a household where money was always the center of attention, specifically the lack of it and how to get more. My parents, Diane and Frank Thompson, weren't necessarily poor, but they were perpetually dissatisfied with what they had. They'd drain their bank accounts on impulsive purchases, then come to me with palms outstretched when the bills arrived. By 16, I was working after school at the local diner, handing over my paychecks to cover our electricity or prevent our car from being repossessed. "It's just until we get back on our feet," Mom would say, but that day never came. Instead, I became the family bank one that never received repayments. My siblings learned from the best. Kyle, my older brother, started gambling in college. His first major loss resulted in a panicked phone call, asking me for $2,000 to pay off some guys who were really serious about collection. I withdrew from my carefully saved college fund to help him. 6 months later, it happened again. And again. Amber, my younger sister, was the entrepreneur of the family, if you can call launching a new guaranteed success business every 8 months entrepreneurship. There was the handmade jewelry venture, the organic smoothie delivery service, the personalized pet accessories, and most recently, a social media consulting agency, despite her having barely 200 followers herself. Each one began with family loans, primarily from me, and ended with excuses about market conditions. Then there was Jason, the baby of the family and my parents' clear favorite. He'd been in college for 6 years with nothing to show for it except stories of epic parties and a mysterious ability to always need just a little more for textbooks and lab fees. I discovered he'd dropped out after paying his tuition directly to him for 3 semesters. 2 years before my lottery win, I'd finally reached my breaking point. After calculating that I'd given my family over $63,000 over the years, money I'd never see again, I accepted a teaching position 2 hours away. I got an unlisted number, created new email addresses, and limited communication to monthly phone calls and holiday visits. The reaction was nuclear. Mom cried about her heartless daughter abandoning the family. Dad accused me of thinking I was too good for us now. Kyle suggested I must be involved with someone controlling. Amber said I was jealous of her potential success. Jason just asked if I could send money for his spring break trip before I left. When I won the lottery, the financial advisor at the Lottery Commission headquarters gave me options. "You can claim publicly or remain anonymous," she explained. "Given the size of this jackpot, I strongly recommend anonymity if your state allows it." I thought about what would happen if my family discovered my windfall. The relentless calls, the sob stories, the endless needs that would suddenly become emergencies. They wouldn't see this as my money, they would see it as their solution. "I'll claim anonymously," I decided immediately. The plan I developed was meticulous. I would establish a blind trust to claim the winnings. I would take the lump sum option, $74.3 million after taxes. Invest conservatively, and make no dramatic lifestyle changes that would trigger suspicion. I would gradually transition from teaching into curriculum consulting, explaining any improved circumstances as career advancement. I would wait at least a year before making any major purchases. I rehearsed stories about a modest promotion, practiced casual responses about finding a good deal on rent, and prepared myself for the inevitable family financial emergencies that would require me to maintain my facade of limited means. What I didn't prepare for was how it would feel to have life-changing money and still live in fear. As I signed the final paperwork and watched the first transfer hit my newly established accounts, I felt a hollow victory. I was one of the luckiest people in America, and I was planning my life around hiding from my own family. The first changes I made were invisible ones. I paid off my student loans, set up automatic payments for my modest credit card balance, and quietly canceled the dental work I'd been postponing due to cost. I called my principal and requested a leave of absence, citing personal reasons and hinting at family health issues that required my attention. Behind the scenes, I assembled a team: a financial advisor specializing in sudden wealth, an estate attorney, a tax specialist, and a therapist who worked with lottery winners. The latter was perhaps the most important, as Dr. Winters helped me navigate the emotional whiplash of my new reality. Many winners feel isolated by their secret, she explained during our second session. The burden of hiding such life-changing news from loved ones creates a unique kind of stress. Even when those loved ones are the reason you're hiding it? I asked. Especially then, she replied. The conflict between protection and deception is particularly challenging with family. I found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Burlington, a city about an hour from my original teaching position. When my mother asked why I was moving, I explained that I'd been offered a curriculum development role that allowed remote work but occasional office visits. The slight salary bump explained the slightly nicer apartment. Just enough change to be believable, not enough to raise eyebrows. My new refrigerator contained foods I'd previously considered luxuries: fresh berries, quality cheese, premium coffee. I bought comfortable shoes without checking the clearance rack first. I scheduled regular massages for the back pain that came from years of hunching over tiny desks helping children with their writing. These small indulgences felt revolutionary while remaining invisible to others. 2 months into my new life, my phone rang with Amber's distinctive ringtone, "Material Girl" by Madonna, my private joke. "Rachel, thank God you answered. I've been trying to reach you for days." Her voice had that breathless quality it always took on when she was about to ask for money. "I've been busy with work," I replied, instantly on guard. "Everything okay?" "Not really." Dramatic sigh. "Look, I know things have been strained, but I've got an amazing opportunity that I'd hate to miss because of, family stuff." The opportunity was a chance to invest in a friend's skincare line using exclusive ingredients from the Amazon. She needed just $3,000 to secure her distribution territory before someone else claimed it. In the past, I'd have either emptied my savings to help her or had a fight when I refused. Now, I had a third option: the appearance of modest help that would maintain my cover. "I don't have 3,000, Amber. I just moved and started a new job. I could maybe do 200 to help you out." It was a painful charade, pretending $200 was significant when I now had millions. 200? Are you kidding me? That's practically nothing. What am I supposed to do with that? "It's what I can afford right now," I said. A statement that was simultaneously the biggest lie and the most important truth of our relationship. "This is why you'll always be stuck teaching other people's kids instead of doing something important with your life," she snapped. "You have no vision, no ability to see opportunity. Keep your $200. I'll find someone who actually believes in me." She hung up, and I sat staring at my phone, feeling both guilty and justified. This was exactly why I was hiding my winnings. 3 months after claiming my jackpot, I met with Sonia, a real estate agent who specialized in luxury properties and, crucially, understood the need for discretion. "Many of my clients prefer privacy," she assured me. Whether for security reasons, business negotiations, or personal preference, she showed me properties through a carefully established LLC, ensuring my name appeared nowhere in the process. I viewed modern penthouses, charming historic homes, and secluded country estates before finally finding the one: a stunning contemporary home nestled in the prestigious Lakeview Shores development, with panoramic water views and the kind of privacy only $7 million properties can provide. Walking through the sun-drenched rooms with their soaring ceilings, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced since childhood. The owner's suite featured a bathroom larger than my first apartment. The kitchen had 2 dishwashers. The backyard ended at a private dock on the lake. "It's perfect," I whispered, already imagining morning coffee on the expansive deck. "It's listed at $3.2 million," Sonia said gently. "Well within your budget, but a teacher with a curriculum development side gig doesn't live in a place like this," I finished her thought. "You mentioned renting initially to maintain your cover story. We could find something lovely but less obviously wealthy?" I sighed, running my hand along the cool marble countertop. "I know I should be practical. I know the smart move is to wait, to ease into this gradually." I looked out at the lake, sparkling in the afternoon sunday. For the first time in my life, I could have something simply because I wanted it. No calculations about sacrifices, no budgeting gymnastics, no justifications to anyone. Just desire and fulfillment, connected directly. "But," Sonia prompted, "but I've spent my entire life being practical, making the responsible choice, putting others first." I turned to her, decision made. "I'll tell everyone it's a rental. That the owners gave me a deal to watch the place while they're abroad for business. I can make that work." It was the first crack in my careful plan, choosing immediate joy over perfect secrecy. I didn't realize then how quickly those cracks would spread. The closing on my dream house happened with remarkable speed. Cash offers tend to streamline processes that normally take months. Less than 30 days after falling in love with the property, I stood in my new kitchen, surrounded by echoing empty rooms and endless possibility. I'd maintained my cover story, telling my family I'd found an incredible opportunity to house sit for wealthy homeowners who were relocating to Europe for 3 years. "They're only charging me slightly above my old rent, since I'll be maintaining the property and it saves them hiring a management company," I explained to my mother over the phone, impressed by how easily the lies now flowed. "Seems strange they'd trust someone they don't know with such an expensive home," she said, suspicion evident in her tone. "Oh, the wife is a former teacher. We connected through a professional network," I improvised. "Plus, they have insurance." Those first weeks in the house were pure bliss. I swam in my private pool at midnight just because I could. I slept in different guest bedrooms to decide which had the best morning light. I ordered furniture that prioritized beauty and comfort over durability and stain resistance. I hired a weekly cleaning service, a landscaper, and even a personal chef to come 3 times a week. Most importantly, I felt safe. The development had a security gate, and my property was surrounded by tasteful but effective fencing. For the first time, I wasn't calculating risks, making contingency plans, or looking over my shoulder. I was simply living. My next-door neighbor, Sarah Miller, stopped by one morning with fresh-baked scones and a warm smile. Unlike the polite but distant neighbors in my former apartment building, she seemed genuinely interested in connection. "The neighborhood does a monthly book club if you're interested," she offered as we sat on my deck overlooking the water. "No pressure, of course, but it's a nice way to meet people." Sarah was easy to talk to, divorced, no children, worked as a dermatologist with her own practice. She didn't ask probing questions about how I afforded the house, accepting my rental story without comment. After years of guarded interactions, the possibility of a friendship based on who I was, rather than what I could provide, felt revolutionary. After she left, I posted a carefully angled photo of the scones against the lake backdrop on my rarely used Instagram account. "New views, new friends, new chapter blessed," read the caption. It was my first social media post in months, a small celebration of my happiness. 3 hours later, my phone pinged with a notification. Meredith, a fellow teacher from my old school, had commented, "Oh my God, is that Lakeview Shores? That's where the Hendersons from my husband's firm just bought. Houses there start at $3 million. What kind of curriculum development are you doing?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't considered that someone might recognize the distinctive shoreline. I deleted the post immediately, but my hands trembled as I did it. Social media never truly erases anything. The confirmation came 2 days later in the form of a text from my cousin Patricia, who I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. Heard you moved into quite the fancy neighborhood. My friend's sister lives on that lake, says the houses are insane. You must be doing really well. We should catch up soon. Within hours, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Family members I barely spoke to were suddenly very interested in my life. My aunt wondered if I could help her daughter find a teaching position at whatever prestigious school had hired me. My father left a voicemail about catching up on all this good news we're hearing. I sat at my beautiful kitchen island, surrounded by all the things I'd thought would make me happy, and felt the walls closing in. The carefully constructed barrier between my lottery win and my family had just developed its first major breach. That evening, as I was considering how to manage the situation, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw a familiar car in my driveway and a familiar figure at my door. My brother Kyle, uninvited and unexpected, stood shifting his weight from foot to foot on my front porch. "Rachel! Open up! I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway," he called out, peering through the side windows. "Just happened to be in the neighborhood and thought I'd check out this mansion you're supposedly renting." With trembling hands, I deactivated the alarm and opened the door. The first member of my family had arrived, and I knew with dreadful certainty that he wouldn't be the last. Kyle stood on my doorstep with the smile I'd come to recognize as his. "I want something" expression, head slightly tilted, eyes crinkled just enough to suggest warmth without actually feeling it. "Wow, sis, you've been holding out on us." He pushed past me into the foyer, letting out a low whistle as he took in the soaring ceiling and curved staircase. "House sitting, huh? Must be some seriously rich people to own a place like this." "What are you doing here, Kyle?" I asked, not bothering to hide my annoyance. "You could have called first." "And missed the look on your face? Where's the fun in that?" He wandered into the living room, running his hand along the leather sofa I'd just purchased. "Besides, family doesn't need an invitation, right? That's what Mom always said." I followed him as he gave himself a tour, opening doors and peering into rooms with the entitled curiosity of someone who didn't respect boundaries. When he reached the kitchen, he helped himself to a beer from my refrigerator before settling at the island. "So what's the real story, Rachel? Patricia says her friend's sister claims houses in this neighborhood go for millions. No way your teacher salary covers this, even with some side gig." "I told you, I'm house sitting. The owners are giving me a deal on rent." "Right," Kyle smirked. "And I'm dating a supermodel who goes to another school." For the next hour, he alternated between complimenting the house. "This view is insane." C. Reminiscing about childhood memories designed to trigger my guilt. "Remember how you always looked out for me when Dad was in one of his moods?" And eventually, the real reason for his visit. "The thing is, I'm in a bit of a situation," he said, picking at the label on his beer bottle. "Some guys I owe money to aren't being very patient." "We're talking broken bones impatient, Rachel. How much?" I sighed, already knowing I would give him something just to get him to leave. 15 grand. When he saw my expression, he quickly added, "But I could make it work with 5, just enough to show good faith." In the past, I would have emptied my savings account for him, terrified that his gambling debts might lead to actual harm. Now, I had the means to give him the full amount without blinking, but I knew it wouldn't stop there. It never did. I went to my purse, counted out $5,000 from the cash I kept on hand, another new habit, always having ready cash for emergencies, and placed it on the counter. "This is it, Kyle. All I can manage right now. You need to get help for the gambling." His eyes widened at the cash. "You just happen to have 5 grand in your purse? In a house you're supposedly just watching for other people?" He pocketed the money quickly, but his expression had changed from grateful to calculating. "Seems like there's more to this curriculum development gig than you're letting on." After extracting a promise that he wouldn't tell the rest of the family about his visit, they'd all want the grand tour, and you know how Mom gets about fancy things, I finally managed to usher Kyle out the door. As I watched his taillights disappear down my driveway, I knew with cold certainty that this was just the beginning. 3 days later, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was my sister, Amber, standing with her 3 children and what appeared to be several suitcases. "Surprise," she said, with a brittle brightness that didn't reach her eyes. The kids and I were just dying to see this amazing house Kyle couldn't stop talking about. "Oh, and we had a little situation with our apartment, so we thought we could crash here for just a couple days while I figure things out. You have plenty of room, right?" Before I could respond, her children ages 4, 6, and 9 had already pushed past me and were running through the house, their shrieks echoing off the high ceilings. "Amber, you can't just show up expecting to stay here," I protested as she dragged a suitcase over the threshold. "It's just for 2 days, Rachel. Our apartment had a pipe burst, and the landlord says it'll be unlivable until they fix the water damage." She lowered her voice. "Plus, between us, I'm a little behind on rent, so this actually helps both of us out. He might forget about the back payments if I'm not there reminding him." Against my better judgment, I helped her bring in the luggage and set up the children in one of the guest rooms. 2 days, I emphasized. I have work deadlines and need my space. Those 2 days quickly became a nightmare. The children treated my home like a playground, jumping on furniture, spilling juice on my new rugs, and in one heart-stopping moment, nearly knocking over a glass sculpture I'd commissioned from a local artist. Amber made vague efforts to control them, but spent most of her time on her phone, leaving smudged wine glasses throughout the house. On the second night, I overheard her phone conversation while passing by her room. "Yeah, I'm still at Rachel's mansion," she was saying in a hushed voice. "The plan is working perfectly. Mom and Dad are coming tomorrow, and then we'll really get to the bottom of where all this money suddenly came from. She's hiding something big. I can feel it." My blood ran cold. There was no burst pipe, no temporary housing crisis. This was a coordinated effort to infiltrate my home and uncover my secret. And now my parents were on their way. I confronted Amber immediately, standing in her doorway as she hurriedly ended her call. "There is no emergency with your apartment, is there?" I said flatly. "You lied to get in here." "Don't be paranoid," she replied, but had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "The kids and I really did need a place to stay. And is it so wrong for family to want to visit each other?" 2 days, Amber. That was our agreement. I want you out tomorrow morning." "Yeah, about that." She twisted her hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "Mom and Dad are already on their way. It would be weird if we weren't here when they arrived, right?" The headache that had been building since Kyle's visit intensified to a blinding throb. My carefully constructed new life was crumbling around me, and I was still pretending to be a teacher who had lucked into an amazing house-sitting opportunity. How long could I maintain this facade when my family was literally moving in? The answer, as it turned out, was not long at all. My parents arrived the next afternoon in their aging minivan, looking oddly formal for a family visit. Dad wore his church-clothes khakis and a button-down that had seen better days. Mom had applied makeup and styled her hair, something she typically reserved for weddings and funerals. "Rachel, honey," Mom exclaimed, hugging me while peering over my shoulder at the house. "What a lovely surprise to find out about your new situation." "It's temporary," I said stiffly. "I'm just house-sitting, like I told you on the phone." "Of course, dear." She patted my cheek. "We brought some of our things, hope you don't mind. The drive was so long, we thought we'd stay a few days to make it worthwhile." Before I could object, Dad was unloading suitcases from the car, plural. My heart sank as I realized my home was being steadily occupied by the very people I'd been hiding from. That first dinner together was excruciating. We sat at my dining table, a custom piece I'd commissioned from a local artisan, while my mother commented on every detail of the house within eyesight. "Those light fixtures must have cost a fortune," she observed, squinting up at the modern chandelier. "And is that real marble in the entryway? The owners must be very trusting to let you use all their things." "Some of it is mine," I admitted, which was technically true. All of it was mine. "I've been investing in quality pieces slowly." On a teacher's salary? Dad snorted. Must be some cushy private school gig you've got? I explained again about my curriculum development work, adding details about consulting fees and flexible hours that I hoped would sound plausible. They nodded politely, exchanging glances I couldn't quite interpret. After dinner, I excused myself to answer some work emails, grateful for the excuse to escape their scrutiny. When I returned to the kitchen an hour later for tea, I found my mother hurriedly closing a drawer in my home office across the hall. "Mom? What are you doing in here?" "Just looking for a pen, sweetheart," she said too quickly. "Thought I'd write down Aunt Judith's new address for you." Later that night, I discovered what she'd really been doing. My financial documents specifically, a folder containing information about my trust and recent investment statements had been disturbed. I always aligned the folders precisely, a habit from years of classroom organization. Now they were slightly askew, with the lottery trust paperwork moved to the front. I secured what I could in my safe, but the damage was already done. The next morning, my parents were waiting for me in the kitchen, expressions somber. "We need to talk, Rachel," Dad said, placing his coffee mug down with deliberate calm. "About where all this really came from." He gestured around at the house. "I told you." "We saw the papers," Mom interrupted. "About the windfall trust. About the accounts with millions of dollars. You won the lottery, didn't you?" My stomach dropped. After all my precautions, all my careful planning, I'd been undone by a nosy mother and an improperly closed drawer. "You went through my personal financial documents. That's an invasion of privacy." "Privacy?" Dad scoffed. "From your family? The people who raised you? Who sacrificed for you?" "What exactly did you sacrifice?" I asked, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. "I was working at 16 to pay your bills. I put my college fund toward Kyle's gambling debts. I funded every one of Amber's failed businesses. And now you're rich beyond imagination and hiding it from us," Mom said, her voice trembling with what I recognized as manufactured emotion. "Do you know what we could have done with that kind of money? Your father's back problems could be treated properly. We could finally retire. Kyle could get professional help for his gambling." "This isn't about helping Kyle," I said wearily. "This is about wanting a piece of what you see as a windfall that should be shared." "Of course it should be shared." Dad slammed his hand on the counter. "That's what families do. They take care of each other." "When has this family ever taken care of me?" I asked quietly. The confrontation escalated from there. My father switched between thinly veiled threats about legal claims on my money, completely baseless, as my attorneys had assured me, and emotional manipulation about all they'd done for me over the years. My mother cried about her health problems and how a small loan of $100,000 would solve all their issues. I refused, explaining that while I would consider helping with legitimate medical expenses if they provided documentation, I would not be handing out cash. "So that's how it is," Dad said, his expression darkening. "You get rich and suddenly we're not good enough for you anymore." "This has nothing to do with being good enough," I countered. "It's about boundaries and respect, neither of which you're showing right now." The arrival of my youngest brother Jason that afternoon only intensified the pressure campaign. Unlike the others, he'd always been more subtle in his manipulations, preferring charm to outright demands. "Look, I don't care about the money," he insisted as we sat by the pool, carefully out of earshot of the others. "I'm just worried about what this is doing to Mom. Her blood pressure, you know? She's always been so fragile." "Mom has never been fragile a day in her life," I replied, unmoved. "And this sudden concern for her health is transparent, Jason." "Fine," he snapped, dropping the concerned son act. "But you have to admit it's pretty selfish to be living like this while the rest of us struggle. $1 million would change my life, and you wouldn't even miss it." By evening, my house had transformed from a sanctuary into a battleground. My parents had taken over the primary guest suite without asking. Amber's children had broken an antique vase from my recent trip to Italy. Kyle had returned and was conspiring with Jason in hushed tones by the fire pit. The walls seemed to be closing in around me. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom. the only space still truly mine, and tried to figure out how everything had unraveled so completely. I'd gone from the happiest period of my life to feeling like a prisoner in my own home in the span of a week. I called my attorney, quietly explaining the situation. "They have no legal claim to your money," she reassured me. "But family pressure can be its own kind of leverage. My advice? Don't engage in their narrative. Don't justify, argue, defend, or explain. That only validates their belief that they're entitled to an explanation in the first place." "And if they won't leave?" I asked, hearing Amber's oldest child running down the hallway outside my door, despite the late hour. "Then we can discuss legal options for removing them," she said carefully. "But let's hope it doesn't come to that." After we hung up, I sat on my bed, listening to my family move through my house as if they owned it, which, in their minds, they apparently did. The lottery was supposed to free me from worry and constraint. Instead, I felt more trapped than ever. The next morning, I woke to find my home office door ajar, despite having locked it the night before. A quick inventory confirmed my fears. Several more financial documents were missing, including the folder containing the press release that would have been issued had I claimed my winnings publicly. I stormed into the kitchen where my family was gathered around the breakfast island, helping themselves to food my personal chef had prepared the previous day. "Who went into my office?" I demanded. "Several important documents are missing." They exchanged glances that confirmed my suspicions. No one admitted to it, but my father cleared his throat in that way he did, before delivering what he considered a reasonable ultimatum. "Rachel, we've been talking as a family. This situation isn't healthy, you hiding your good fortune, living in luxury while making excuses about house-sitting. It's time for honesty." "Honesty?" I laughed bitterly. "Like breaking into my office and stealing my personal papers? That kind of honesty?" "We're worried about you," Mom interjected smoothly. "This kind of secrecy isn't like you, and families should share their blessings." Before I could respond, my phone rang. The screen showed my financial advisor's number. With a growing sense of dread, I stepped onto the patio to take the call. "Rachel, we have a situation," Mark said, his normally calm voice tense. "Someone claiming to be your father tried to access your accounts this morning. He had enough personal information to get past the initial security questions, but thankfully, our enhanced protocols flagged it as suspicious activity." My vision tunneled. "Did he? Was he able to access anything?" "No, but he was quite persistent. Claimed you had authorized him as your financial representative. When pressed for documentation, he became belligerent with our staff. I thanked him, requested additional security measures on all my accounts, and ended the call, my hands shaking with rage and betrayal. When I returned to the kitchen, my father couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Trying to access my accounts?" I said quietly. "That's not just invasive, Dad. That's illegal." "You're overreacting," he muttered. "I was just trying to get a clearer picture of the situation so we could have an informed discussion about family support." I ordered everyone out of my house immediately, a demand met with protests and accusations of cruelty. Only Amber gathered her children's things, seeming to recognize she'd pushed too far. The others settled in defiantly, my father stating they would leave once we've come to a reasonable arrangement about the family's financial future. Exhausted and outnumbered, I retreated to my bedroom to formulate a plan. I would call my attorney again, arrange for formal eviction if necessary. I would hire security. My phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. When I checked the screen, my blood ran cold. A local news notification read, "Breaking. Local teacher wins mega lottery, keeps fortune from struggling family." With trembling fingers, I opened the full article. There, below the sensationalist headline, was a quote from Frank Thompson, identified as my father. "Rachel abandoned us once she got her millions. We're a hard-working family that's faced a lot of setbacks, and now, when she has the means to help, she's living in luxury while her own mother can't afford needed medical treatments." The article included details about my win, the exact date, the amount, even a mention of the trust I'd established to maintain anonymity. information that could only have come from my stolen documents. Within minutes, my phone exploded with calls and texts from friends, former colleagues, and numbers I didn't recognize. I switched it to silent, feeling panic rising in my chest. My private life, the very thing I'd worked so meticulously to protect, was now splashed across local news, with my own family painting me as a villain. As if orchestrated, my doorbell began ringing insistently. Through the security camera, I could see a growing collection of people on my front porch, neighbors I'd barely met, a van from the local TV station, and what appeared to be curious onlookers drawn by the commotion. I heard my father's voice downstairs, and the sound of the front door opening. He was inviting them in, inviting strangers into my home to witness what he clearly thought was his moment of justified outrage against his selfish daughter. Sarah, my neighbor and potential new friend, texted, "There's quite a circus at your place. Are you okay? Do you need help?" Before I could respond, there was a soft knock at my bedroom door. "Rachel?" It was Amber, sounding uncharacteristically subdued. "They're talking to reporters downstairs. Dad's showing them around the house, telling them how you refused to help Mom with her medications." A pause. "I didn't think he'd go this far. This isn't what I agreed to." I opened the door to find her looking genuinely distressed. "What exactly did you agree to, Amber?" "Just to help figure out if the rumors about you having money were true. Maybe convince you to help the family out if they were." She fidgeted with her sleeve. "Not this. Not public humiliation and lies about Mom being sick. She's fine, you know that, right?" At that moment, my mother's voice floated up from the foyer, tearfully telling someone about her serious health condition that her millionaire daughter refused to help with. "They want you to come down," Amber said quietly. "They're saying if you don't agree to share the money, at least $1 million for each of them, they'll keep talking to every reporter who'll listen. They'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned your family when you got rich." From downstairs came the unmistakable flash of cameras and the murmur of a growing crowd. My sanctuary had become a stage for my family's most manipulative performance yet, with me cast as the villain and my lottery win as the plot device that revealed my true character. The ultimatum was clear: share my fortune, or they would destroy my reputation and privacy completely. Standing in my bedroom doorway, I felt a panic attack building, the familiar tightness in my chest, the difficulty breathing, the sensation of walls closing in. I hadn't had one since the weeks following my win, when the enormity of maintaining my secret had first hit me. "I need to get out of here," I whispered, more to myself than to Amber. I grabbed my emergency bag prepared months ago for situations I'd hoped would never materialize, containing cash, a change of clothes, and duplicate identification documents. As reporters and family members crowded my living room below, I slipped out through the owner's suite balcony, down the exterior stairs, and across to the side gate where I'd parked my less conspicuous second car. The last thing I saw as I drove away from my dream home was my father gesturing expansively on my front porch, playing to the cameras while my mother dabbed at non-existent tears beside him. The luxury hotel suite felt like a prison despite its elegant furnishings. I'd checked in under my middle name, paid in cash, and hadn't left the room in 3 days. Room service staff probably thought I was a celebrity hiding from paparazzi, not entirely wrong, except my pursuers were my own flesh and blood. My phone contained hundreds of missed calls and messages, reporters seeking comments, old acquaintances suddenly remembering our friendship, and increasingly threatening texts from my father and brothers. Only my mother maintained the wounded victim narrative, sending messages about how heartbroken she was, that money had changed me so much. The local story had gained traction nationally, picked up by those infuriating, ungrateful lottery winner roundups that websites love to publish. Most featured my father's calculated sound bites about abandonment and family obligation, alongside unflattering photos they'd somehow obtained of me looking stressed at the Lottery Commission office months ago. On the third morning of my self-imposed exile, I finally answered a call from my attorney, Elise Harper. "This is getting out of hand, Rachel," she said without preamble. "I've been monitoring the coverage. They're painting quite a picture." "They're lying," I said, my voice hoarse from crying and lack of use. My mother isn't sick. I didn't abandon them. I've supported them financially for years, even when it meant sacrificing my own needs. I believe you, Elise replied calmly. And we need to develop a strategy to manage this situation. Can you meet me at the office? We've increased security since your father showed up yesterday demanding to speak with me. 2 hours later, I sat in a conference room with Elise and two other members of my financial team, Derek, my financial advisor, and Monica, a crisis management consultant they'd brought in. Your family has no legal claim to your money, Elise reiterated, spreading documents across the table. Morally, they may feel entitled, but legally, they have nothing. That's not stopping them from destroying my life, I said bitterly. They've taken over my home. They've turned me into a public villain. I can't even go outside without worrying about being recognized and confronted. Which is why we need to address the public narrative, Monica interjected. Right now, they're controlling the story. We need to reclaim it. How? By revealing even more of my private business? That's exactly what I was trying to avoid by claiming anonymously. Privacy is important, Monica acknowledged. But when false narratives take hold, sometimes selective disclosure is the only effective counter. We're not suggesting airing every detail of your family dynamics, but rather establishing enough context to challenge their portrayal of events. As they outlined potential approaches, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. Sarah, my neighbor. Still thinking about you. If you need a safe place to regroup, my guest house is available. No reporters have connected me to you yet. Just an offer from someone who knows what it's like to have family try to control your life. For the first time in days, I felt a small flicker of hope. Someone who had no stake in my money, no history of manipulation, was simply offering help. The meeting continued for hours as we developed a multi-pronged approach to address the immediate crisis. Legal steps to reclaim my home. Documentation of my years of financial support to counter the abandonment narrative. Potential limited media engagement to present my perspective. But it was during a break, sitting alone in Elise's office while the others gathered additional materials, that I finally broke down completely. Years of emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and boundary violations crashed over me in waves. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, until my ribs ached and my throat was raw. It wasn't just about the money or even the public humiliation. It was the crushing realization that the people who should have loved me most saw me only as a resource to be drained. When Elise returned, she silently handed me a box of tissues and sat beside me rather than across the desk. "I want to tell you something," she said after I'd composed myself somewhat. "Before I became an attorney, I was a social worker specializing in elder abuse cases. I saw a lot of financial exploitation within families. What you're experiencing, the guilt, the self-doubt, the questioning whether you're the unreasonable one, these are typical responses to long-term financial manipulation. They're my family," I whispered. "Shouldn't I want to help them?" "Helping is different from enabling," she replied gently. "And boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. Your lottery win didn't create this dynamic. It just magnified what was already there." Something shifted in me during that conversation. The fog of guilt and obligation began to lift, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt since seeing those matching numbers on my lottery ticket. I called Sarah and accepted her offer of the guest house. I authorized Elise to begin legal proceedings to remove my family from my home. And most significantly, I stopped reading their messages and watching the news coverage. That evening, as I settled into Sarah's comfortable guest house, she brought over dinner, and more precious than food, a perspective untainted by manipulation. "My ex-husband was financially abusive," she shared as we sat on her patio. "Not taking money from me, but controlling every cent, making me account for every purchase. After the divorce, I had to learn that being generous isn't the same as being taken advantage of. That having boundaries doesn't make you selfish." "How did you learn to set those boundaries?" I asked. "Practice," she said simply. "And distance. and surrounding myself with people who respected them. She refilled my wine glass. Also, therapy. Lots of therapy. For the first time since my win, I felt something shift from defense to offense. I'd spent so long trying to protect my secret that I'd forgotten to protect myself. Now, with clarity emerging from my emotional breakdown, I could see the situation for what it was. Not a family conflict, but a systematic attempt at financial exploitation by people who had been practicing this dynamic my whole life. The next morning, I called my family directly, a conference call arranged by Elise so they could all hear the same message simultaneously. I know you're in my house. I know you've been speaking to the media. And I want you to know that I have documented every instance of financial support I've provided over the years, every manipulative text, every false claim you've made to the press. My voice was steady, my resolve firm. You have 48 hours to leave my property before formal trespassing charges are filed. Any personal belongings left behind will be placed in storage for 30 days, after which they'll be donated. The explosion of protests was exactly what I'd expected. Accusations of cruelty, reminders of family obligation, threats of further public exposure. I let them spend themselves in their outrage before continuing. I've also prepared a complete accounting of the $63,427 I've provided in financial support over the past 10 years, with dates, amounts, and stated purposes. If you continue to pursue this public campaign claiming I've abandoned the family, this documentation will be made available to set the record straight. You wouldn't dare, my father sputtered. You're just trying to intimidate us. I'm not trying to intimidate you, I replied calmly. I'm establishing boundaries, for the first time in my life. With that, I ended the call, turned to my newly assembled team, and nodded. Let's move forward with the plan. The next phase of my life would not be about hiding or appeasing. It would be about reclaiming what was mine, not just my home and my privacy, but my right to define my own relationships on healthy terms. The money hadn't created this toxic dynamic, but perhaps it had given me the resources to finally break free of it. The strategy we developed was comprehensive, but measured, designed not to escalate the situation into all-out warfare, but to firmly establish boundaries while protecting my reputation and privacy. First came the legal component. Elise filed for an emergency injunction to remove my family from my property, citing trespassing, the unauthorized media access they'd granted to my private residence, and documented attempts to access my financial accounts. The judge, unimpressed by my father's claims of family rights, granted the order within 24 hours. Next came the media strategy, carefully crafted by Monica. Rather than engaging in a public back and forth that would only feed the news cycle, we selected a single respected journalist known for thoughtful profiles rather than sensationalism. Melissa Canton, from the regional Sunday magazine, had recently published a series on the psychology of sudden wealth and seemed to understand the nuances better than most. Remember, Monica coached as we prepared for the interview. The goal isn't to vilify your family or present yourself as a victim. It's to provide enough context to challenge the current narrative while maintaining your dignity. The interview took place in a neutral conference room, with me dressed simply but professionally, a conscious contrast to both the greedy millionaire and poor victim images that might have been expected. Melissa's questions were probing but fair, allowing me to address key points without descending into family drama. I've actually been the family's primary financial support for many years, I explained when she asked about the abandonment claims. Like many lottery winners, I chose anonymity to protect my privacy and prevent exactly this kind of situation from developing. Your father claims your mother needs medical treatment you've refused to fund, Melissa noted. I've always been willing to help with legitimate medical expenses, I replied evenly, but those claims would need to be substantiated with actual medical documentation, which has not been provided despite my requests. Throughout the interview, I maintained a balance between honesty and restraint, acknowledging the complexity of family financial dynamics without devolving into accusations. When Melissa asked if I had documentation of my previous financial support, I simply stated that I did, without offering to share what was ultimately private information. As we concluded, she asked the question I'd been prepared for. Many people would say that with $120 million, helping families should be a given, regardless of past dynamics. What would you say to that? I would say that healthy relationships aren't transactional, I answered carefully. True generosity comes from love, not obligation or coercion. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is not to enable patterns that ultimately harm them. While the interview was being prepared for publication, we moved to reclaim my home. I'd expected resistance to the court order, perhaps even a confrontation, but instead found my family had departed hastily, though not before causing significant damage. Furniture was broken, walls were scuffed, and it appeared someone had deliberately poured red wine on white carpets and bedding throughout the house. Sarah accompanied me for the initial walkthrough, her quiet presence a counterbalance to the violation I felt seeing my beautiful home in such condition. They wanted to punish you, she observed as we surveyed the master bathroom, where someone had smashed several expensive bottles of perfume. This is about control. When they couldn't control you through guilt or public pressure, they tried destruction. The cleanup and repairs would take weeks, but I chose to see it as a cleansing, a physical manifestation of the emotional purging I was undertaking. In the meantime, I continued staying in Sarah's guest house, grateful for both the sanctuary and genuine friendship developing between us. When Melissa's article was published, the impact was immediate but nuanced. Titled The Hidden Cost of Lottery Dreams, it used my story as a starting point to explore broader issues around sudden wealth, family expectations, and the psychological impact of financial boundaries. Rather than a direct rebuttal to my family's claims, it provided context that subtly undermined their narrative without creating new headlines. The piece included insights from financial psychologists about family systems and money, statistics about how many lottery winners face similar situations, and thoughtful exploration of the cultural expectations that often place women in caretaking roles regardless of circumstance. My direct quotes were minimal but impactful, particularly the closing line where I noted, "Wealth can provide security and opportunity, but it can't buy healthy relationships. Those require mutual respect, something no amount of money can purchase." As anticipated, my father attempted to continue his media campaign, but found considerably less traction. The sensationalist angles had been largely exhausted, and my refusal to engage in a public battle denied oxygen to the story. Outlets that followed up on Melissa's more nuanced piece found my family's claims increasingly inconsistent and contradictory. The final component of our strategy involved legal cease and desist letters regarding defamation and harassment. These were delivered not just to my family members, but to several media outlets that had published particularly egregious falsehoods without verification. Kyle was the first to contact me directly after receiving his letter, his tone markedly different from our previous interactions. "Look, this has gotten out of hand," he said, sounding genuinely uncomfortable. "Dad and Mom took things too far. I just wanted to say I'm backing off, okay? No more interviews. No more stuff about you abandoning us." "I appreciate that," I replied neutrally, having learned to be cautious about apparent concessions. "For what it's worth," he added after an awkward pause, "I shouldn't have told them about your house. That was supposed to be between us. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing to accountability I'd heard from any family member." I thanked him again and ended the call, neither burning the bridge nor lowering my newly established boundaries. 2 weeks after the article's publication, with repairs to my home nearing completion, the police called to inform me that my parents and sister had been escorted from the property as they attempted to return. They had brought more reporters with them, clearly hoping to create another spectacle. This time, however, the story played differently. Security footage showed them being calmly but firmly denied entry to private property, a stark contrast to the victimhood narrative they'd been cultivating. Several outlets declined to run the story at all, and those that did presented it as an unfortunate family dispute, rather than the David versus Goliath tale my parents had been promoting. As I stood in my newly repaired kitchen that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the lottery win: peace. Not happiness exactly, the wounds were too fresh for that, but a quiet certainty that I was finally taking control of my own story. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "You've changed so much. Money has made you cold. I hope one day you remember what family really means." I read it twice, recognizing the familiar pattern of emotional manipulation that had worked so effectively in the past. This time, however, it didn't trigger guilt or uncertainty. Instead, I felt a calm clarity as I replied simply, "I do know what family should mean. That's why I'm creating healthier boundaries. I wish you well." Then I blocked the number, poured myself a glass of wine, and stepped out onto my deck to watch the sunset over the lake, reclaiming both my home and my right to define my own future on my own terms. 3 months after the confrontation with my family, I stood in my kitchen making coffee, realizing it had been over a week since I'd thought about the media storm or checked for suspicious activity on my accounts. The vigilance that had defined my days was gradually receding, replaced by a routine that felt almost normal. The house was quiet now, no siblings arguing in guest rooms, no parents making demands for my living room sofa. The damage had been repaired, and I'd made some changes to truly make the space my own. New furniture replaced items with unpleasant associations. The security system had been upgraded, and most importantly, I'd finally begun to feel that this was truly my sanctuary, not just an expensive hideout. Media interest had waned entirely, as we'd anticipated. After an initial flurry following Melissa's article, the story of the family abandoning lottery winner had been replaced by newer scandals and sensations. My name no longer appeared in Google alerts I'd set up to monitor coverage. On this particular morning, I had plans with Sarah to visit a financial literacy nonprofit I'd been researching. In the aftermath of the family crisis, I'd spent considerable time reflecting on what I actually wanted to do with my fortune beyond simply protecting it. The irony, I told Dr. Winters during one of our sessions, is that now that I'm not spending all my energy hiding and defending my money, I'm finally able to think about using it meaningfully. With her guidance, I'd begun exploring ways to transform my painful experience into something constructive. The concept of a foundation focused on financial literacy and breaking cycles of financial abuse resonated deeply. It wouldn't erase my experience, but it might help others recognize and address similar dynamics before they escalated. Sarah arrived promptly at 9, bringing fresh bagels from the local bakery we both loved. Our friendship had deepened over the months, built on shared experiences with family financial manipulation and a mutual appreciation for boundaries. "Ready to change the world?" she asked with a smile as we headed to her car. "Or at least a small corner of it." The nonprofit we were visiting, Financial Foundations, specialized in educational programs for schools and community centers. Their director, Marcus Wilson, had been recommended by Elise for his innovative approach to teaching financial independence. Throughout the tour, I was struck by how many of their materials addressed the exact issues I'd faced: emotional manipulation around money, difficulty setting financial boundaries, the complicated dynamics of family support. "Many people don't recognize financial abuse because it's often cloaked in love language," Marcus explained as he showed us their curriculum. Phrases like, "if you loved me, you would help," or "family always supports family," can make it difficult to establish healthy boundaries. After the tour, over lunch with Marcus, I shared my interest in potentially funding an expansion of their programs. "I've been thinking about establishing a foundation," I explained. "Something focused specifically on the intersection of family dynamics and financial well-being." "That's actually an underserved area," he noted enthusiastically. "Most financial education focuses on budgeting and investing, but the emotional and relational aspects of money are equally important." By the time we left, I had a clearer vision for what would become the Clear Boundaries Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping people recognize and address financial manipulation in their relationships while developing practical money management skills. As Sarah drove us back, she asked thoughtfully, "Have you heard anything more from your family?" "Not directly," I replied. "Kyle sent a birthday card last month, just a card. No requests or guilt trips, which is progress. I heard from my cousin Patricia that Amber has actually gotten a steady job for the first time in years." "And your parents?" Radio silence since the restraining order expired. I said with a mix of relief and lingering sadness, "I think they're waiting for me to come crawling back when the guilt becomes overwhelming." "But that's not happening," Sarah observed, glancing at me. "No," I agreed. "That's not happening." We drove in comfortable silence for a while before she spoke again. "You know, when Tom left me, people kept saying I'd regret the boundaries I set, that family is too important to walk away from. It took me years to understand that sometimes the healthiest family relationships are the ones you choose." Her words resonated deeply. In the months since the confrontation, I'd begun building a chosen family of sorts, people connected by mutual respect rather than obligation. Sarah, of course. Elise, whose role had evolved from attorney to mentor. Marcus and his team at the nonprofit. Even my former principal, who had reached out after the media coverage to offer support rather than judgment. That evening, as I settled onto my deck with a glass of wine and Sarah, watching the sunset paint the lake in golds and purples, my phone chimed with an unexpected notification. An email from my mother. My stomach tightened instinctively as I opened it, braced for manipulation or demands. Instead, I found something unexpected. "Rachel," it began simply, "I've been doing some thinking. The way things happened wasn't right. I can see that now. Your father still doesn't understand, but I've started attending a support group for parents, and it's opening my eyes to some hard truths about how we treated you over the years. I'm not asking for money or even forgiveness right now. Just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand." Mom. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd ever received from her. I showed it to Sarah, who read it carefully. "What will you do?" she asked, handing the phone back. "I'm not sure," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe it's genuine. Another part remembers all the other times I thought things were changing. "You don't have to decide right now," she reminded me. "One of the luxuries of boundaries is the ability to respond in your own time." She was right, of course. The old Rachel would have immediately responded, eager to repair the relationship at any cost. The new Rachel, the one who had weathered public humiliation, betrayal, and come out stronger, understood that true reconciliation required more than a single email. If my mother was genuinely beginning to recognize the dysfunction in our relationship, that was a positive step. But rebuilding trust would take time and consistent behavior change on both sides. My boundaries weren't walls designed to punish. They were structures to ensure any future relationship would be healthier than the past. As the last light faded from the sky, I put my phone away without responding. Tomorrow would be soon enough to consider my next step. Tonight was for appreciating the peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. "You know," Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence, "when I first heard about your lottery win, I thought, how lucky. Now, having seen what you went through, I realized the money was just a magnifying glass for what was already there. The real win wasn't the lottery, it was finding your voice and your worth." I smiled at the insight. The irony is that for years, I thought supporting my family financially was how I proved my love. It took having more money than I could ever spend to realize that love isn't measured in dollars. In the months and years that followed, I would gradually build the Clear Boundaries Foundation into an organization that helped thousands of people recognize and address financial manipulation. I would cautiously rebuild a limited relationship with my mother, who continued her journey toward healthier dynamics. I would maintain firm distance from my father and siblings, though Kyle would eventually make his own steps toward change. Most importantly, I would learn that the true value of my lottery win wasn't the financial freedom it provided, but the painful yet liberating lessons it taught me about what could and couldn't be purchased. Security, comfort, opportunity, these the money could buy. But respect, genuine connection, healthy love, these had to be built on stronger foundations than dollar signs. As I look back now on that turbulent time, I realize that winning $120 million didn't change who I was. It simply gave me the resources to finally discover who I had been all along, someone worthy of respect, capable of setting boundaries, and deserving of relationships based on mutual care rather than calculation. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members over financial issues? What do you think you would do if you won the lottery? Would you tell your family or keep it private? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be navigating complicated family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the most valuable things in life are the boundaries we set to protect our well-being. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength in creating the healthy relationships you deserve.